The same names come up every time. Page, Hendrix, Clapton, Slash. And if you already know those names, the conversation is already missing something. Because the most interesting guitar playing in rock history didn't always happen in the spotlight. It happened just behind it. Today, we're going through 10 guitarists who changed how the instrument was played, thought about, and understood, and who almost never appear when people talk about the greatest. By the end of this list, one thing will be clear. Influence and recognition are not the same thing. They never were. Number 10. Mick Ronson from the Spiders from Marr's, David Bowie's band. There's a version of David Bowie that doesn't exist. The alien, the glam icon, Ziggy Stardust. That version required a specific guitar sound, not just to play songs, but to construct an entire world. And the person who built that world is almost never mentioned. Mick Ronson wasn't a guitarist in the traditional sense. He was an architect. When he joined Bowie for the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Marr's, he didn't accompany the music. He designed it. The way the guitar moves through that album, the string arrangements, the tonal decisions, the exact moment something cuts through or pulls back, none of that was accidental. It was built. He took the same approach on Lou Reed's Transformer. Songs that, in other hands, would have stayed raw and somewhat rough. With Ronson's arrangements, they became something close to cinematic. He added structure without adding weight. What makes this strange is the reason he's forgotten. It isn't incompetence, it's the opposite. Ronson understood, better than almost anyone, that the guitar's job wasn't to be noticed. Its job was to make everything else sound inevitable. And when you do that well enough, people remember the song, not you. Number 9. Alvin Lee from 10 Years After. At Woodstock in 1969, a guitarist played "I'm Going Home" at a speed most of his contemporaries couldn't follow. 500,000 people were watching something they had never seen before, and most of them didn't know his name. Alvin Lee of 10 Years After was considered one of the fastest guitarists of his era, but calling him fast was like calling Coltrane loud, technically accurate and almost completely beside the point. What made Lee remarkable was the depth beneath the speed. Every fast run was grounded in blues phrasing, actual blues with the weight of it intact. That combination, intensity without emptiness, was rare then and still is. But there's a specific irony in how his legacy unfolded. Speed, the quality that set him apart, also became the thing that dated him. When Eddie Van Halen arrived at the end of the decade, the conversation about fast guitar playing reset entirely. A new standard appeared, and Lee didn't try to meet it. He stayed exactly who he was. A guitarist who helped define what velocity could mean in rock music ended up partially overshadowed by the revolution he helped make possible. If you think we missed someone, and there's a real chance we did, drop the name in the comments. Not just the name. Tell us why. That's the conversation worth having. If this list surprised you, subscribe. There are more of these. Guitarists, producers, bands that shaped everything and got credit for almost nothing. Not just the name. Tell us why. That's the conversation worth having. Number 8. Steve Hackett from Genesis. There's a technique you've heard on thousands of guitar solos that most people assume was invented in the 80s. Sweep picking, tapping. Extended legato runs across the full neck. The guitar treated as something between an instrument and an orchestra. All of it was being explored a decade earlier by someone most people outside of progressive rock have never heard of. Steve Hackett's work with Genesis in the early to mid-70s is one of the most technically advanced bodies of guitar playing in rock history. On Firth of Fifth, his solo doesn't feel like a guitar solo. It feels like a poem written in sound, melodic, precise, emotionally exact, in a way that very few players have ever achieved. Without Hackett's explorations, the landscape of virtuoso guitar in the decade that followed looks different. Yngwie Malmsteen, John Petrucci, the entire genre of progressive metal, all of them working from a foundation that has his fingerprints on it, even when the credit doesn't follow. The reason he's missing from most mainstream conversations isn't the music, it's the format. Progressive rock is a genre that mainstream rock history has always treated as a footnote, and the guitarists inside it tend to disappear along with it. Number 7. Johnny Marr from the Smiths. Name the greatest guitar solo from the Smiths. You can't. There isn't one. And that isn't a weakness. That's the entire point. Johnny Marr redefined what a guitar could do in a pop context without playing a single note that was there to impress you. With the Smiths, he built architecture. This charming man, How Soon Is Now, the whole record, The Queen Is Dead. In every one of those, the guitar isn't an instrument you notice. It's the structure that makes everything else hold together. How Soon Is Now is worth examining specifically. What Marr was doing technically, a tremolo effect running through multiple amplifiers simultaneously, tuned to create that specific shimmer, is a sound that has never been exactly replicated. Most people who have heard that song 100 times don't know there's a guitar doing something technically unusual. They just know the song feels like something. That's Marr's particular paradox. His greatest skill was making invisible things that required extraordinary precision to construct. The bands that copied him through British indie in the 80s and 90s were copying his architecture, a way of thinking about the instrument that most of them didn't fully understand. He didn't play lead guitar. He played the reason the song exists. Number 6. Alex Lifeson from Rush. If you asked most Rush fans what makes the band great, they'd say Geddy Lee's voice or Neil Peart's drumming. Both answers would be correct, and both answers would be leaving something out. Alex Lifeson has spent decades as one of the most technically complete guitarists in rock, doing it inside a band where two other members were so individually distinctive that his contribution became almost invisible by comparison. In most interviews about Rush, his name comes up third, sometimes not at all. La Villa Strangiato is the clearest evidence. An instrumental piece where the guitar builds an entire narrative across 9 minutes. Not the same riff repeated, not a jam. A composed emotional arc that moves between hard passages and something approaching ambient. From aggressive to delicate and back again, with the kind of structural control that most rock guitarists never need to develop because their genre never asks for it. Lifeson plays hard rock when the song needs hard rock. He pulls completely back when the song needs space. In another band, working in a context where the guitar had more room, he'd be recognized as a generational talent. In Rush, he's the secret weapon that makes the whole thing work. Number 5. Robert Fripp from King Crimson. Most guitarists try to sound better than the last person who played the song. Robert Fripp didn't want to sound like a guitarist at all. With King Crimson, Fripp took the instrument in a direction almost no one has followed since, not because it was difficult to execute technically, but because it required a completely different philosophy. Angular lines, dissonances that don't resolve, patterns that build tension instead of releasing it. The guitar as part of a system rather than a protagonist inside one. On Starless, from the album Red, the guitar doesn't arrive to impress. It builds. For minutes, it adds layers, each pass adding pressure to what's already present, until the impact arrives not through speed, but through the structure assembled from the beginning. It's one of the most precisely engineered guitar performances in rock history, and it sounds nothing like what most people picture when they hear the phrase guitar performance. The reason his name doesn't appear on conventional lists is the same reason his music works. He doesn't fit, not blues, not hard rock, not shred. The categories that produce recognition don't apply to what he was doing. And when you can't be placed, you tend to be left out of the conversation entirely, even when the conversation should have started with you. Number 4. Prince solo artist. At the 2004 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame tribute to George Harrison, several of the most celebrated guitarists alive took the stage for While My Guitar Gently Weeps. Tom Petty was there. Jeff Lynne, Steve Winwood, and one more player, brought in almost as an afterthought, who proceeded to play a solo that made everything before it sound like warm-up. Prince begins restrained, almost polite. And then, over the next 60 seconds, he takes complete control of the stage, the song, the room, and the entire legacy of the moment. At the end, he turns and walks off without looking back. His guitar falls somewhere off stage. It doesn't matter. He was already done. The reason Prince isn't discussed as a guitarist in the traditional sense has nothing to do with ability. He was so entirely everything, songwriter, producer, arranger, multi-instrumentalist, that his guitar playing got quietly folded into a larger category called genius and stopped being examined on its own terms. That solo still exists. It's worth examining on its own terms. Number 3. Gary Moore from Thin Lizzy, later a solo artist. Very few guitarists have mastered two completely different guitar languages at the highest level. Most pick one style, develop it fully, and stay there. Gary Moore didn't see that as an option. Before he became one of the defining voices in modern blues, Moore was playing with Thin Lizzy. Fast, precise, hard rock with an edge that matched anyone working in that era. Riffs that hit clean, solos that didn't hesitate, and then he walked away from all of it. Still in the Rain and Parisian Walkways aren't hard rock performances. They're blues, played with a compression that could only come from someone who had spent years in a completely different musical context. Every note in those recordings is carrying weight, not from technique, but from restraint, something underneath the playing that wasn't there before. The difficulty with Moore's legacy is that he never settled into a clean narrative, too evolved to stay in hard rock, too intense to be filed simply under blues. In a genre where legacy often depends on being associated with one defining sound, Hard to Place quietly becomes underrated. Both halves of his catalog are extraordinary. That's the problem. Number 2. Kath from Chicago. In 1967, Jimi Hendrix heard a guitarist perform and told him directly, "You're better than me." Hendrix, by most accounts, was not the kind of person who said things like that. The guitarist was Kath. The band was Chicago. Before Chicago became known for radio-friendly ballads and polished pop production, it was a band with a guitarist who played with a rawness and unpredictability that matched anything happening in rock at the time. Kath didn't work from a defined structure. He responded to the energy of the moment. Abrupt changes, saturated tones, passages that felt genuinely improvised in the most honest sense of the word. Every live performance was different because he wasn't recreating anything. Listen to the early Chicago recordings. I'm a Man, 25 or 6 to 4. The live albums from that era. Something is happening in all of them that most guitarists spend decades trying to access and don't reach. In January 1978, Kath died accidentally at 31. The band continued, and over the following years moved toward a much softer sound. His era became a separate chapter. Whatever quality Hendrix heard, whatever that specific thing was, ended before it had time to settle into a legacy people still argue about today. Number 1, Rory Gallagher from Taste, later a solo artist. His guitar looked like it had been through a war. The sunburst finish almost entirely gone, wood exposed in places it wasn't supposed to be exposed, and when he played it, the only thing you could think was that the instrument had earned every mark. Rory Gallagher never needed anything else. No image, no production designed to make him appear larger than the music. From his years with Taste through his solo career, the approach never changed. The guitar should sound like it's happening in this room, right now, without a layer of anything between the playing and the person listening. What he had technically was phrasing. A specific ability to build a blues rock sentence where every note had a reason to be there. Not speed, not flash. The kind of control where nothing feels placed. It just arrives, and you don't question it until it's already gone. The strange shape of his legacy is this: not forgotten, not ignored, just slightly outside the frame. Known deeply by people who know him, cited quietly by other guitarists as a primary influence, absent from most mainstream conversations about who matters in rock history. That's the specific shape of being underrated. Not invisible, just not quite where the light lands. These 10 guitarists didn't play in obscurity. They performed in front of audiences and left recordings that millions of people have heard. But recognition doesn't always follow what matters most. Sometimes it follows what's easiest to name, what fits an existing narrative, what arrives at the right moment with the right image attached. If you think we missed someone, leave it in the comments below. Not just the name, tell us why. That's the conversation worth having. Subscribe for more stories from the parts of rock history that don't usually make the official list. Thanks for watching.